So once you've got all your materials done and you're satisfied with it, you can now go in and you can make a particle. So by default, you probably won't have a particle folder, but you just go right click, new particle system. I made my groupings particles. You can call yours particle, let's go fire, particle test. Make sure this says particle system, and this should open up the particle editor. By default, you should only have one particle, and this is what the particle looks like currently without any textures, materials, without any models, nothing, without anything added to it. So I will show you what my particle looks like that I made at the end, the fire particle. As you can see, this is what my fire particle looks like. Now this is how mine looks. So what you can do is, in order to add a new particle emitter into your workspace, you simply go right click, new particle sprite emitter, and that will create a new one. What I would do is I would start by making 3 different particle emitters, one for cloud, one for the ember, one for the fire itself. For the fire itself, it is important, first of all, and this goes with all of them, is to go under the fire particle, go under required, open up the emitter tab, and you want to go find your particle, the material I mean, in the content browser, find the material, select the material, go in the editor and hit the right arrow. This will place the material onto the emitter and you should see it, and it should change to the particle. Now another important thing to have for the fire is something called the sub-UV. By turning the sub-UV is what tells the program to actually look at your image in pieces instead of as one big part. So in this case, you want to make it the sub-image horizontal. Oops. Horizontal is 3 by 3. This is telling the program that this is a 3 by 3 image. Now next thing you want to do is you want to change the interpolation method. By default it's none. You want to change that to random blend. So from none to random blend. And this will give you the single flame. Now your flame will usually only show the first left flame. In order to make it so that it actually cycles through all your different flames, you must add this sub-image index. You don't need to play around with any of the values in there, just put it in and it will cycle through all the images. Other important ones you have for this particular emitter, I have set the spawn to 40. I have done the lifetime to 0.355 and the max for lifetime to 2. The initial size for max, for the starting size, max is 70 all around, and minimum is 25. This means I've scaled the fire to be 70 times its normal size, and for maximum, and it's going to be, for the minimum, it's going to be 25. Initial velocity, I set the maximum to 170. This means that at max, it's gonna go a little bit to the x direction, a little bit to the y, but mostly it's gonna go up. Minimum, I set it to -1, -125. This will give it a bit more of a cone look when it actually emits. Color over life, I've done nothing to it, but I believe you need it on. Without it on, it will never show up. But basically, I set it to 111. And how these modules are kind of special. Anything that has something by life over life, what it means is that you can actually graph points telling the editor, telling the particle emitter what to do at certain time intervals. In this case, for color over life, it's saying that at the start, it's going to be the original color. and at 1 second in, it's still going to be the same color. This is going to change for some of the later ones that you will see. Like size by life, for example, I have set it to, at the start, it's 1, 1, 1. For the second point, at 0.6, it's now half the size that it usually was. And then for a third point, at 1, I set it to 0, 0, 0. I've also given this particle an initial rotation with a minimum of 0.1. This just gives a further changes and little slight changes and warping in the fire itself. For the ember particle, the most important thing about I try to convey with the ember particle is the fact that it only emits every once in a while. In order to do this, you can go under the required and go under this delay tab and give it a 0.9 delay. This means that every 0.9 9/10 of a second it's going to shoot particles out, giving this just a look that every once in a while, it's a nice touch. Spawn, I tell it to spawn 50. I give it a lifetime of minimum of 0.1, maximum of 1. Initial size is all around 4. This means there's going to be no deviations between size. All of it is going to be the same. Initial velocity, I gave it 50, 50, 300. Minimum of -50, -50, 100. So this gives a nice cone if you were to ever look at it from a top-down angle. And it also shoots really, really quickly. Color over life, I gave it just 1 point, and for that point, at 0 at the beginning, I gave it 3, 1.10. This will change the ember from its original grayish look to more of an orangish look. Of course, this will only work if you have a vertex color node in the material for this ember. Now, another big change is I have 3 different types of smoke emitting with the same material. What I did was I first made the one smoke material particle emitter, and I set it so that it will spawn 30. It will spawn 30, and you'll notice that these all have the same. Oops. These all have the same except for the last one, but 30. I gave it a lifetime of 0.1, 1.8, and I believe that's a little different for some of them. Initial size, I gave it an 80, 80, 80, and 40, 40, 40 for minimum. And that is the same all through. The only difference, it seems, I changed the second emitter. But yeah, after you've made the first emitter, what you can do is you can duplicate the emitter that you've made by going right-click, emitter, duplicate emitter. Once you've duplicated it, I would duplicate it one more time, and this is where you can start changing the different values. I did for the second one, I changed the lifetime to minimum of 0.3, and it really doesn't matter. It's a lot of tweaking for your own sake. For the spawn of the third one, I changed the constant to 50, which means it will now spawn a lot more. Now, big changes are the color by life and size by life. You can kind of ignore velocity by life if you haven't already figured out, but a lot of these you can be added from down here if you just right click. A lot of these velocity by life, sub UV is sub image index, size, and so on. So color by life, what I did for the first emitter, and I can even just show you with only this emitter, this is what the emitter looks like all by itself. So color by life at 0, this is a 3-point graph, but at 0 I set it to be 1.5, 1.1, 0.5. So it starts off with this really light yellow, then it goes into at 0.8, it changes to 5, 1.2, 0.2, And for the third point, at 1, it will go, I change it to 1, 1, 1. So this basically does, it starts from a lightish yellow to a golden orange, all the way back, all the way to a dark, to its normal gray color. For the second particle, second smoke, which is a lot, as you can see, is much more golden, orange, reddish color. I started, this is all, should be 3 points, yes, it's 3 points. I gave it a 0. At 0, it's 10, 1.2.2. At 1, I gave it a point, at 0.8, I gave it a 10, 1 and a 0. And at for the third point, at 1.2, I gave it a 1, 1, 1. So like the other one, this one should eventually gradually change into a grayish color if it gets that late. For the last particle, I gave it a color over life. Oh wait, I didn't do the size by life. Size by life, for this particle at 0, I did 0.7 all around. At 1, I did 1.2 all around. For the third point, at 1.5, I gave it 0.1. So this thing gets bigger and then it gets really, really tiny when it gets to the end. Did I go over this? Size by life for the first particle, just in case. I have at 0, I had 1.7. For the second point, 1, it goes 1.2. And at the third point, 1.5, at 1.5, it gets really tiny just like the other one to 0.1. So for the last one, the color over life, at 0, it's 10, 1.2.2, so it starts off fairly reddish, but then it quickly goes to, at 1, it's 1 all the way around. So this one's more prominently gray. Size by life, I gave it at 0, 0.7, at 0.8, it's 1.2, at 1.2, it's 2. So this one, instead of getting smaller, it gets larger and larger. And basically, this, I believe these are all the necessary parts to try to replicate this fire that I made. A lot of it is simply either tweaking around in the material editor, the particle editor, or simply just creating really good textures to use. Once you're all done with this, you can close it. Make sure you save your package, and to use it, simply find the particle, drag into your scene, hit this play button to play it in the viewport without having to render anything. And there you go. That is my fire particle in the scene. One thing to note is once you've made it, you do not want to scale your particle, especially scaling it up. Scaling it down smaller doesn't make as big of a difference as scaling it upwards, because the particle system just simply doesn't work well for scaling. And well, thank you for watching this. I hope you've learned a little bit of something about using particles and making things. And okay, bye bye.